Okay, hello everyone. This is the April webinar presented by the Essex County branch of Ontario Ancestors. My name is Linda Urquhart, and I'll be your host for tonight. Pat Clancy will be monitoring the questions, so thanks to her for doing that. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home, including the first inhabitants of Essex County. The Anishinaabe group, part of the Three Fires Confederacy, comprising the bands Potawatomi, Ottawa, and Ojibwa or Chippewa, as well as the Huron or Wendat or Wyandot bands. We must all acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and consider how we can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So thanks for joining us. We hope you're enjoying the warmer weather. Spring is just around the corner. Actually, summer is almost just around the corner. So just a reminder that this presentation is being recorded and will be added to our YouTube channel. Also, everyone is muted and your camera is turned off during the presentation. And questions will be answered following the presentation. Just add your questions as we go along to the chat box, which you will find when you hover your mouse at the bottom of your screen. We will add a handout to the chat box during the presentation. For those who are first-time visitors to our webinars, we are one of the 35 branches or special interest groups of Ontario Ancestors, also known as the Ontario Genealogical Society, which is the largest member-supported genealogical organization in Canada. It was founded in 1961 with its mission to encourage, bring together, and assist those interested in the pursuit of family history and to preserve Ontario's genealogical heritage. We are the Essex County branch of Ontario Ancestors. As of April 1st, we were excited to announce that we are making a change to our membership fees for our international family. For those who live outside of Canada who join or renew as of April the 1st, all membership fees will be charged in Canadian dollars instead of US dollars. We look forward to having you join us and help us move forward on our mandate of preservation, advocacy, and education related to the genealogy in Ontario and Essex County. We also wanted to thank Catherine Knight, a longtime member of the Essex branch, for her very generous donation to our library of the Timothy Kent books. Timothy Kent has devoted decades of research to uncovering the stories of the fur trade in the Great Lakes region and the St. Lawrence Valley. Fort Pontchartrain at Detroit is a guide to the daily lives of fur trade and military personnel, settlers, and missionaries at French posts. Rendezvous at the Straits explores fur trade and military activities at the forts at Michilimackinac. And Phantoms of the Fur Trade includes detailed biographies of 20 couples who worked in the trade between 1618 and 1758. If you are descended from any of the early French inhabitants of Essex and Kent counties, you are sure to find at least one of your ancestors included in these books. My husband found 4 of his, and the information given in these books has given him a much greater understanding of how his ancestors lived during this period. More information about these volumes will be presented in a future Essex branch update. Here are the links that we show every webinar, but it is useful to visit them periodically as new things are added all the time. Feel free to take a screenshot. The first link is to our parent organization, Ontario Ancestors, where you will find many Ontario resources. Just add your ancestor's name to the search bar and see what you find. Next is the link to the Essex branch website, which has Essex County resources, including our members' library, which is packed full of local resources. Other links include our YouTube channel, where you can review past presentations. We also always encourage you to interact with us by joining our Facebook group and following us on Twitter and Instagram. I'm just going to take a drink of water. Losing my voice here. So here are some of the upcoming webinars that you may find interesting. Tomorrow, the Scottish SIG is presenting Scottish folklore. On Thursday, the Lambton branch is offering researching in British Columbia. This Saturday at 10 a.m., Lynn Palermo for the Kingston branch will talk about writing family history, turning research into shareable stories. Next Monday, the Sudbury branch webinar is by Ken McKinley called On Land from a Genealogy Perspective. If you miss Ken's land series or land record series, this will be very helpful in finding the land records of your ancestors. On Wednesday, April 20th, the Elgin branch is offering Google My Maps, visualizing your ancestors' lives. Then on Saturday, May the 7th at 10 a.m., London and Middlesex branch is presenting using ancestry through lines to power your family history research. Personally, using through lines has been immensely valuable in confirming some of my own family connections via DNA. And for other webinars, check out the events calendar at the Ontario Ancestors website. You can find it under the Education tab. And just a reminder to save the date for the Ontario Ancestors Conference 2022, which will again be virtual. The theme of the conference is the past, the present, and the future. It will be hosted by the Ottawa branch on June 24th to the 26th. There will be My Heritage Day on Friday and 28 presentations over 2 streams on Saturday and Sunday. Registration is now open, and you can see the website there, conference2022.ogs.on.ca. We also wanted to let you know that our featured resource on the website this month is the story of Jean-Baptiste Desjardins and Adeline Nantes. This family history, as well as many more, can be found in the members library. We will be changing this featured resource monthly to give you an idea of what you, as a member of the branch, can find in the members library. And we are announcing that as of today, a new resource has been added to our public pages. Under the resources column, you'll see it there with that green arrow. I don't know if you can read it. It's the Black population in Windsor from the 1861 and 1864 censuses. If you click on that, you'll be directed to this page. And again, I'm sorry, it's pretty small there, but what you can do there is you can review the over 1,300 entries, or you can search for a specific name to see if they are included in either or both of these censuses. We are in the process of tracking where these individuals can be found after President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on the 1st of January, 1863, and after the end of the Civil War in April of 1865. The results of this further research is not expected to be completed before the end of 2023, but when it is published, it will be housed in the members library, or it will be available in the Essex Marketplace. Our next webinar is on Tuesday, May the 10th at 7 p.m., where Dr. Laura Smith will discuss the early Irish immigrants in Essex County. And you'll see the link to register for this on in the events section of our webpage, of our Facebook page. And tonight's presentation, joining us is Debra Honor, who will be presenting what she learned about genealogy during the COVID lockdown. And just a few words introducing Debra. Debra is a retired elementary school teacher. She is a graduate of the National Institute of Genealogical Studies. She writes genealogical and historical articles for branch newsletters, OGS families, as well as other journals and her local newspaper. As a member of the Ontario Genealogical Society for 42 years, Debra has served for many years on the Essex Branch Executive, the OGS Board as a Regional Director, and has received the Robert Crawford Community Service Award from Ontario Ancestors. Debra has also been a speaker at the Ontario Ancestors Conferences and several branches, as well as many other historical groups in Essex County. She is a member of the United Empire Loyalists Association, having proven 10 Loyalist ancestors. Other groups she is involved with include the Bellevue Conservancy and the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Debra. It's all yours.
Thank you. Now to do this properly. It worked from the beginning. Come on. Now to get rid of all the people's names, go there. Oh, great.
Looks good.
I got it. Okay. Well, thank you, Linda, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And thanks to the Essex Branch for asking me to be a speaker again with the group. The last couple of years, we've all been dealing with COVID, and it's been a very stressful time period for all of us. And one of the things is all the illnesses and the deaths and all the sadness that we've had. So, but for the last 2 years, it also gave me an excuse to work on my family history. It's one of those things where you get always busy at home and with doing other things and visiting with family and that. And you said, oh, I wish I could have more time to work on my genealogy. Well, that's what the last 2 years have been, sitting at my desk and working on my genealogy. So I've got 10 points that I would like to bring up and that are things that I've been learning about genealogy during this time period. And they're not all things that I didn't already know, but some of the stuff that I found is what makes it more interesting, I guess. So let's get started. The first one, I don't know everything about genealogy, and the amount of information online is overwhelming. When you're working, you don't have the time to go out and look at all the different websites that you want to look at. And then when I had the time, I'm looking, oh my goodness, there's too many websites. There's too many podcasts. There's too many different things that you could look at, different websites. And so you've got to sit down and figure out which ones are the ones that you can focus on for your family tree. And pick everybody, sorry. You have to pick the ones that are relevant for you. So just to show you an example, these are the ones that I go to. It's not everything that's out there, and I don't go to all of these at all times. But these are the different kinds of sites that I go to, the podcasts, Roots Tech, going to a conference like OGS, the Ontario Ancestors Conference, belonging to the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society, because I've got research to do there. Library and Archives Canada, the big ones, cemetery searches, free newspapers, so many different places you can go to get information. And you really you can't go to everything. You just wouldn't have time. All of those podcasts on there, they're all really nice, but I don't have time to watch all of them. Number 2, digitize your photos, front and back, as arranged in the photo album. Now, this is something that I learned from Lisa Louise Cook. And at the beginning of COVID, she started a podcast on Thursdays that I started watching, and it was called 11Z's with Lisa, and she would have tea with you. And she would give advice. And the one that she gave that I really appreciated was digitizing your photos, front and back, as arranged in the photo album. And what I did was I took one of the photo albums that my husband has for his family. And what we did was to figure out who owned the photo album and why they might have chosen those pictures. So the photo album is for the Honor family. And in the Honor family's photo album, there's 38 pictures. Only 5 have names. And that's these 5 children. And if you look at the names on the back of the photos, there's only one that has a last name. And the last name is Dixon, not Honor. So that gives us a clue as to who owned the photo album, because the person who owned the photo album was Mary Ann Armstrong. Mary Ann Armstrong married William Honor, and her mother's maiden name was Dixon, Fannie Dixon. And that gave me a clue to get started on how to find out who the other people are. So what did I already know? Well, I knew James Armstrong married Fannie Dixon. They had 3 children by 1830. And in 1830, James Armstrong and Fannie Dixon left their children in Ireland, and they came to Canada. He was a stonemason, and he was supposed to work on the Citadel in Quebec City. He got sick on board ship, and soon as after arrival in Quebec, he died. So he's buried in Quebec. Fannie was pregnant at the time, returned to Ireland, and had their 4th child. Now, we are descended, Robert, my husband, is descended from Mary Ann Armstrong and William Honor. Mary Ann Armstrong's brother, William Armstrong, we knew quite a bit about because he married Sarah Seal. Well, Sarah Seal just happens to be William Honor's niece. And the 2 couples came down to Amherstburg to settle, and they shared a farm for a while. So that's why we know a lot about William Armstrong. We knew very little about John Armstrong or James Armstrong. So that's what we knew before I went and looked at the photo album. Now, what do we know now? We've got the 5 children. I've got them written in red. And Mary Ann and William are over there on the left-hand side in green. So I thought, well, it's a good chance these 5 kids belong to the same family. And sure enough, I looked at the 1881 census, and there were the 5 children with their parents. Well, if their last name is Dixon, they must be a cousin's kids. So Mary Ann and John Dixon are first cousins. So the children who are written in red are first cousins once removed. And through researching in the area of Durham County, we found James Dixon. Oh, I forgot something. Fannie Dixon came back from Ireland in 1836, but she didn't settle in Quebec. She settled in Durham County. And this is probably why she settled in Durham County, is because she had 2 brothers that were already living there. So she was coming back to Canada to be with family. So we now have 2 brothers and Fannie Dixon and their families. So as you can see, Fannie had 4 children, James had more than 5, and Thomas Dixon had 9 children. Oh, the other thing was Mary Ann would quite often go up to Durham County to visit the family, and she would take her daughters with her. And her sons were a little bit upset about this because every time they went up, the daughters always wanted new dresses. So all the little family stories come in handy here. So as we're looking at the story of the family, I thought, okay, so if we found the Dixon side, maybe we can find John Armstrong. So I looked in the census records and I found John Armstrong. And then I thought, well, there's got to be a way of finding Fannie. So in the search records on Ancestry, I just put in Fannie. I put in Fannie, and then I put in the area that I wanted. It was just for the Durham County area. And there was only one. And she lived right next door to John Armstrong. So that made it very clear that she was Fannie Dixon. And she had married Michael Halloran. And with Michael Halloran, she had another 4 children. So any of these people could have been in the family photo album of Mary Ann Armstrong. So, number 3, sharing a family history online enables you to collaborate with distant cousins. So I took all the information I found on the Dixons and on the Armstrongs, and I placed it in Ancestry, and it's an open family tree, so anybody can look at it. And about a week later, I get an email from a person named Ian from New Zealand. He's tracing all of the Dixon family in Durham County in Ontario. He has a professional looking up all the baptisms and marriage records of the Anglican churches for his records. And we had to figure out how we were related. Here's my little list again. James Dixon married Margaret Dixon. No, that's not a mistake. Her maiden name was Margaret Dixon as well. But she's James Dixon's first cousin. So Ian's side of the family comes from Margaret Dixon's side, and our side comes from James Dixon. And that's the connection between the two of us. We've been able to work together and figure out the location in Ireland where our families came from, and we've both been able to find birth and marriage records in Ireland to confirm that. The one thing about his side of the family is that 3 of the brothers, I think there were 3, had seen an advertisement in New Zealand asking for people who knew how to grow wheat to emigrate to New Zealand. Now, we often think of people emigrating from Ireland to New Zealand, but these people emigrated from Ireland to Canada and then to New Zealand. And that's how some of the family got down there. Well, years ago, when I was first starting to work on my husband's family, we went to Port Hope, and I took a picture of this tombstone. And I couldn't figure out how he fit into the family, because I didn't know how far back in the Dixons we could go. But this tombstone is for Ian's side of the family, so I sent him a copy of it. Francis Dixon, born in the township of Hope in 1833, went to New Zealand in 1864, returned to Port Hope 1901, died in 1908, and Thomas and Ellen Gaynor underneath are his brother and his brother's wife. So it was nice to be able to share this with him too. Another way of sharing with a family. I put on some pictures of the family history of the pictures of the family on Ancestry. And a lady from Utah wrote to me who's related to us on my mother's side. Okay, this is the Leach side. And she said, you've got the 2 names mixed up on the pictures of the mother and the daughter. So I fixed that, and she sent me some pictures. Her grandmother, I think, was Dorothy Leach. So on the left-hand side, there's Catherine and Alexander and Edmund Leach. Those are her 3 older siblings. My grandfather is the middle one, Alexander. I have never seen a picture of these 3 as little kids. And underneath is their father and mother and their youngest brother, Gordon. Sadly, Gordon died in Pontiac, Michigan. He drowned. So she didn't send me a picture of Dorothy as a young child, but she sent me a picture of all of her siblings. The middle picture is their father, Dugald Alexander Leach. And I've never seen this picture. I've seen other pictures of him as an older person, but this was a really nice picture of him as a younger man. And then the lady on the side, Elizabeth Ellen Scott Leach, she's his mother. So she was able to give me pictures of 3 generations. It really pays to do some kind of sharing with people in different families, especially when family members move away. They will often take pictures with them to share, to remember their family members that they've left behind. This is another picture she gave me. See the one sticking out her tongue? That's my mother. My mother can be goofy. She didn't show up very often to my sister and I, but it was really cool seeing this picture. That's her 2 brothers and her sister, her dad, and her great-grandmother, because that's Alex's grandmother. He was my grandfather, Alexander Leach, was the little one that was sitting in the chair up in the upper left-hand corner. Okay, at Christmas time, I had an email from a lady in England. And she says, my husband has been trying to find out about his grandmother's family. And she was wondering how we were related in the Honor side and if we knew anything about his grandmother, whose name was Rachel. She never talked about her family. She had moved to England, but she was born in Ireland. They knew the birth date was probably the 4th of June, 1916. Well, back in 1985, Robert and I had gone to Ireland for the first time, and we actually went to the church. And the minister gave us the original documents, and we were sitting there copying all afternoon every marriage and baptism we could find. And even though our family left in 1830, we kept writing all of the honors names right up to 1916. As you can tell by the bottom, there's Rachel's baptism. And there's a question mark for the father, and therefore she was probably born out of wedlock. And that's why she probably didn't want to talk about her family. But on those records was also all the family that I've been able to trace back 4 more generations. And Natalie was very happy that she could give her husband his family tree back 4 generations for Christmas. And I was glad to help her out. Number 5, take a DNA test and connect with other cousins. I've done 5 different DNA tests, but if I'm looking for cousins, I use Ancestry because it seems to be the easiest. They've got the most family trees on it to connect with. And for this story, there's my family tree, my pedigree chart. As you can tell, it's pretty much all complete except for one red rectangle at the bottom. My own grandmother admitted to her daughter that she was born out of wedlock as well. And so that's a blank spot I had. Well, on Ancestry, there was this man by the name of Bill. And I thought, well, if you've been into Ancestry and you know how to use the through lines and that kind of stuff, you can sort of figure out how people are related, and you can add a color for a different family. So for his family, I added brown because I didn't know how they fit in. And it's one of those topics where you're not sure you really want to contact somebody or not, because you don't know how they're going to react to hear that a family member might have had an affair, or, you know, that a child was born out of wedlock. Bill contacted me, and that would have been around November or December of last year. No, yeah, last year. Anyways, we got talking, and I figured it out that Clara Louise Downing had been with his grandfather And he says, oh, this is exciting. I didn't know my grandfather had a child out of wedlock. Well, it's not something you really talk about. Oh, my cousin would be so thrilled. And she passed away, and she has all the family history stuff. And I don't know if I can get a hold of it or not. And I told him that I was from Amherstburg. Oh, my cousins live in Amherstburg. His cousin lives about a mile from me. And we've met. And she was thrilled too. She gave me her sister's 2 boxes of binders on the family history. And in 3 months, I had completed it back to Loyalist ancestors. So with talking to Bill, I've been able to finish my pedigree chart. And it's really neat because since that research, I've also been able to realize I can get back to the ship before the Mayflower. I never thought I'd find any family that did that. Now, the red dots on my pictures, those tell me those are my lines for Loyalist ancestors. I have 8 Loyalist ancestors on my father's side. And now on my mother's side, I will have 5. 3 of them are still with the Dominion genealogist, if she passes them. I hope so. But I've become very good friends with my new cousins. And it's funny because their sister, Margaret, was a member of Essex Branch, and she was a member of the Loyalist group that I belonged to as well. So we've probably met and we just didn't know that we were related. Number 5, before traveling to cemeteries, check online records. Okay, I have to admit, I do some things the wrong way. So it's COVID time, it's spring, it's nice weather, want to get out. You know what? Going to cemeteries is a wonderful thing. All those dead people don't have COVID, and there's not a lot of living people in a cemetery. So I thought, okay, the project I'm going to have this spring is to go to all the little cemeteries and take pictures of the tombstones of my direct ancestors. And I had written down the names of the people and the cemeteries they were in. And then we went to the cemeteries. Well, in Gosnell Cemetery, I was looking for Eliza Ride and John Scott. And we looked all over the cemetery and could not find it. So we went home and I put on Facebook that I can't find this tombstone. Does anybody know where it is? And somebody said, well, if you're a member of Kent Branch, which I am, and you go into the members only section, you can look at the cemetery books. Oh yeah, I'll go look at the cemetery books. Well, I looked at the cemetery books and I realized we had parked the car right beside the tombstone. But I was looking for an old tombstone. I wasn't looking for a tall cylindrical tombstone in granite, red granite, that would have more than 1 generation on it. So a few weeks later, we went back and we took a picture of it. So I do have the picture. Sort of back to Durham County now. In Durham County, they have a really nice website called semsearch.ca, and you can look up all the family members that they've been able to find. One of the things about it is that they have done transcriptions at different times by different people. So it's not all done at one time. And one of the ones that they had from an earlier transcription group was for Fannie Dixon, and they had her death date on there. The thing is, when they finally put the 3 different transcriptions together, they did not know where Fannie Dixon's tombstone was. They had it written down on one of them, but they didn't write down what cemetery it was. And that was a shame, but they haven't been able to find the tombstone since. But there's Dixons and Bensons and Armstrongs and Hallorans, all buried in Bewdley Cemetery. It's on the top of a little hill, and it's not a big cemetery. And that was another trip we took in the fall and went to the cemetery to find all the tombstones. So there was supposed to be a tombstone for John Armstrong, her third son. And we looked all over and we couldn't find it. It was missing. And that's probably got knocked down and just taken away. It was a sad situation in the cemetery. A lot of the tombstones were knocked down. But I was lucky enough to look online, and on Ancestry, Hope Merrifield back in 2010 had gone to Bewdley Union Cemetery and had taken a picture of the tombstone. So even if the tombstone's not there, thank goodness somebody else took a picture of it and I could get a copy of it. So you never know when you can find a tombstone. Number 6, don't stop at transcriptions. Find the originals. I'm sure you've heard this often. And always check genealogy websites for new records. So on my husband's side of the family, he has a person named Richard Colmer Ross, who was a lieutenant in the Royal Navy during the Napoleonic Wars. And he married Marie Elizabeth Michaud. They got married twice. Once at the City Hall of Verdun in France, and once by an Anglican priest. Now, the reason why this happened is that Richard Colmer Ross was captured by the French and was in Verdun as a prisoner of war. And as an officer, they were treated quite well in town. They were allowed to walk around town. They could go to parties. And at the very beginning of the war, they were not allowed to marry any of the French people, but after a while, they were given permission. That's why there are 2 marriage records. There's the 27th of December, 1810, and the 10th of January, 1911. So Find My Past had the Anglican priest one, and I also got that from a man named Peter Clark in London, England. And it's like a regular British marriage record. You don't always get a lot of information on it. What I wanted was the City Hall of Verdun, their records. Remember we talked about myheritage.com? And I said they've got the records for from Filet. Well, maybe I haven't said this yet. I'm going to say it more than once, though. MyHeritage.com in the last year have access to the records from Filet. It has the marriages and the from the churches, and also from the civil hall records. From these records, I found the first publication of the bands. Actually, I found 2 of the publication of the bands. And even with the bands, it's amazing what they're telling. A native of Plymouth, he was the son of James Ross as a purser, so he was in the Navy. And Elizabeth Colmer, both parents are dead. He's a prisoner, lodging with Mr. Wavo, merchant shoemaker in Verdun, at Belviere Street. He even tells you where he's living in Verdun. And the fellow that he's living with was a shoemaker. It's interesting. 3 of his sons became shoemakers. I wonder what he was doing in his spare time while he was in Verdun, learning how to become a shoemaker. And Marie Elizabeth Michaud, we know who her father is, that he's a clock merchant. And Anne-Marie Evard, and she's living with her parents on Verdun Street. If I went to on St. Pierre Street, sorry, if I go to Verdun now, I wonder if I could find those houses. And then the marriage record. This marriage record is both pages. the second page are 6 different legal things that had to be done for the French government for them to get married. The first page is the marriage contract. And this is what the marriage contract has in it. Tells you who the mayor of the city is. They got married at 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon. Richard Colmer Ross, it gives how old he was, his birth date, which doesn't match another document that I've got, but it's close. His father's name, he was a purser of the Navy. Elizabeth Colmer is his mother. They're both deceased. He's living just like it was in the bands, okay? But then you look at the witnesses. You've got Claude Barbe Michaud. You got the father's age, and that he's declared consent to the marriage. Joseph Everard Arquebusier, merchant. Those are old types of rifles that he was selling. He's 56 years old. He's a second cousin on the mother's side of the bride. Jean-Baptiste Manquier, he's also listed on the Anglican Church records as a witness. He's 58 years old, maternal cousin of the bride. And the last 2 were friends. Like, that's an awful lot of information that you can use to trace maybe farther back on the French side of the family. So looking for the original document really pays off. Number 7, while checking record collections, such as the Upper Canada land petitions, search for all persons with the same surname and multiple spellings. The Loyalists so let me go back. The Upper Canada land petitions are usually used by people trying to prove their Loyalist ancestry. And a lot of times they only go to the son and the daughter, and I am of the such and such Loyalist. It makes more sense to look at all of them to find out more information on the family. So I'm giving this one example. It's Edward Hazel. He's in the Loyalists in Ontario, Sons and Daughters of American Loyalists by William D. Reed. And he went through all of the land petitions up to a certain date, I'm thinking, and tried to put all the family members together. Not everything is correct in the book. He has put some children with the wrong parent, but it's very interesting what he has put together. So here's Edward Hazel. He's got 5 daughters, no sons. And on the side where it's got the dates, the OC stands for Orders in Council. That's the date that the government said, yes, this is the daughter of Edward Hazel. So then she gets her land grant, okay? So when you go to Library and Archives Canada, you can look up the Upper Canada land petitions. And this, you put in the last name, and you do have to do it multiple times for all the different kinds of spellings that you get. So on this one page, we've got Hazel spelled E-L. We have Hazel spelled E-L-L. And on another page, there's a Hazel with this, which is L-E or E-A-L. So of these, there are 4 for Edward Hazel. They are all for the original Edward Hazel. There's Frederick, he lives in Fredericksburg. It says Lake Erie, so that's the original name of Amherstburg. Amherstburg was in Malden. One of his land grants was in Mercia Township. And then in 1790, I guess they didn't know where he was living. But and then there's Agnes. That was one of his daughters that was mentioned, and hers was in 1840. Then there's this Sarah. Now, Sarah has Hazel/Roberts. Roberts is her married name. She's in Mercia, so that's the correct area. She's applying for the land petition in 1849. That seems a bit old to be going for a Loyalist as a daughter of a loyalist ancestor, she was 63 years old and only applying then for her land. She had to prove that she was the son, or she had to prove that she was the daughter of Edward Hazel by getting somebody else in the area who was still living who knew Edward Hazel. And he had to give an affidavit. And this affidavit is why you look at all of the land petitions with the same name. And here's his application, his part of the land petition. He tells us that Sarah is the daughter of Edward Hazel, who was a loyalist. And Edward Hazel died in 1822. I don't have a death date for Edward Hazel. He was age 70 years old. Agnes Hazel, his wife, died in 1837. There's no tombstone for those two people. I don't know where they're buried. And then he lists 10 children. There are 3 sons that I never knew about. And he tells who everybody's married to. Now notice in here, Agnes is now married. Agnes wasn't married before when she applied for her land petition. Not quite sure about that last name though, so I have to figure that one out. And then he's got Daniel married to Hannah Hilborn. I've got documentation that proves that Hannah was actually married to Richard, not to Daniel. And also, if you look at the birth dates, the kids are born in 1780s, or they're born in the 1800s, and there's none born in the 1790s. Birth dates aren't quite correct for all of the children, but there's the names. He had a larger family than just 5 children. And this is the reason you need to go through the land petitions for everybody's names that are the same surnames, and just see what kind of other information you can find on the families. One of the other things I found was Sarah's tombstone in Lakeview Cemetery in Leamington. And on her tombstone, there's 4 sides. One for her, one for her husband who died during the War of 1812, a daughter, and a son. What's really neat is this was part of the property that Edward Hazel was granted as a loyalist. Now, he did not own the property at the time that the cemetery was started. The cemetery was started much later. But it's interesting to know that a lot of his descendants are buried on the original farm. Number 8, while checking those record collections, check the dates that they cover and search for other family surnames in that same time period. So we're going back to the Upper Canada land petitions. Notice they go up to 1865. Well, I know the Honor family came in 1830 from Ireland. They're not loyalists. I wonder if there's any land petitions in there for them. So I went checking. And sure enough, I found some Honors, 3 of them. Now, the 2 Thomases are the same person. He was a military, he did serve in the British military, and he came with the rest of the family to Canada in 1833. The red one arrow down to Edward, he's the oldest son, so he didn't serve in the army. And Loughborough Township, if you don't know, is close to Kingston, okay? But Edward's land petition was a gold mine. He wrote a 3-page letter. And in that letter to the government, he is saying, my father and grandfather have both served in the troops, and my uncle and grandfather by my mother's side served His Majesty. My 3 first cousins named Moffat served in the Continental War, and 2 of them were killed. My brother served sometime in the Assar's, from which he purchased his discharge. That's Thomas.
Hi, Deborah.
Yes.
Sorry, you're kind of fading in and out. I don't know if you're maybe too far away from the mic, because there's sound, we're having trouble hearing you a little bit, and then you kind of come back louder.
Oh, I don't know why, because I'm pretty close to it all the time.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
My wife's father served for a number of years as a commissary storekeeper. He died about 1 year back, and his widow receives a pension. And he goes on for 2 more pages on family members that have served. I wish he had added all the names, but this gives us a reason to maybe do a little bit more research farther back into the family. Number 9, learning the history of an area sometimes reveals the reason why a family member was present at a certain time and place. This past summer, we went to an area called Temiskaming Shores, and it's 3 little towns, and the one town is called Cobalt. And Cobalt is a National Historic Site because it was the first silver mine that was found in Ontario. And the whole area, as you can tell by the little map beside it, is a place where you can go around and look at all the different silver mines. The funny thing was, when I came home, I found a marriage record. I already had it, but I was looking at it, and Irene Hill, her family, she was there were 11 daughters and 1 son in this family of the Hills. She married a Greek man by the name of George Prokos. And if you look in the red box, they were married in Cobalt, Temiskaming on the 3rd of July, 1916. Why would she get married in Cobalt when she was born and raised in London, Ontario? And now we know why, because that was the highlight of the silver mining area. And her husband was a merchant, so he was selling stuff to the people in the silver mines. By 1921, the 2 of them are back in London, and he's working in a candy factory, because by that point, the price of silver had dropped and the mining had gone downhill. So it pays to look, if they're in a different spot, find out why they're in what was going on in that town at that time period that would have taken them there instead of being in their regular place of where they were living. Number 10, a family tree is correct until new information is found that proves something wrong. So if you've ever watched Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates Jr., which I do quite often, before he comes on, there's a little spot that they don't even keep on long enough for you to read the whole thing. But underneath it says, the findings presented in this series are based on professional guidance and research. The discovery of additional sources or interpretations may affect the conclusions. And this kind of research can also be based, you can also see it being used in scientific stuff, not just in historical research. So I am helping out a friend of mine who's Italian. I'm 98% British. All of my research is done in English. So it was a real challenge to work with someone who is working with another language. It wasn't too bad, but we dealt with it. Her grandmother's name was Julia Marie Brunetti, and she married a Rupert. She was born the 3rd of October, 1886 in Gresse, Armentières, France. She died the 7th of January, 1923 in Detroit, Michigan. So as a genealogist, you work backwards. So 1923 in her obituary, she was born in France in 1886. In 1920 census, she was born in France in 1886, sorry. 1911 doesn't tell you where she was born. 1910, she's born in Italy. 1900, She's born in Italy. Now, the family has always known her as Giulia Marie, and that she was born in France to Italian parents. Okay, that's the family information. So in the passengers list that I found in 1895, this is when the family came to the United States the first time, the names are written in Italian, even though they're on a French, they left from Le Havre in France. So we have Enrico, and he was born in 1860, and his job was a stone carver. His son, Natalie, there's Carlo, then there's Angelo, Andrea, and Rosina. Now, if you remember, Judith was born in 1886. It says Angelo. It says the person is a male, not a female. That's the one thing that's not really working out right. Julia is her name, not Judith. Her mother and her oldest sister came at a different time. They came on a different ship, and their names are underneath. So when you're dealing with somebody from Italy or from France, their names can be written in the Italian version or in the French version or the English version. So in the 1895 passengers list, they're written in Italian. In the US Census, they're written in English. So we have Enrico is Henry, Natalie is Nate, or Pietro would have been his middle name, and he went by Peter. Carlo and Charles. Andrea is Andrew. Rosina, Rosa. And then with Francesca, in French it was Françoise, Francis in English. And Louisa doesn't change very much. But that Angelo really didn't make any sense. Until I went back to my heritage, and they said she was born in France. So I put in Brunetti at the top and just the two parents' names, and up popped this birth certificate or birth record from the civil records. And it starts at the bottom of the first page. It says Brunetti, and goes over to the other page. I have translated it. Now look at the red words first. We've got Mr. Brunetti. He's a Mason. That matches. They're living in Favier, though that doesn't quite match. It's a female child born the 3rd of October, 1886, so the date matches. The mother's name matches, Françoise Zanalotti. And down at the very bottom is the father's whole name, Henri Brunetti, which is the French version. But they've given the first names of this child as Angeline Marie. So her birth record gives her real name that her parents gave her, Angeline Marie. Now, up at the top right-hand corner, I have Giulia Marie Brunetti Rupert, born the 3rd of October, 1886, in Grèce, Armentières, France. That's what the family always said. Grèce, Armentières is at the north end of France, up close to Germany. When I did a Google search for Favier, I found Favier. There it is on the right-hand side here, Favier. And close to it, the big city, is Grèce Armenvilliers. They didn't pronounce it correctly. And that's how they got confused. But there are 3 other births of her siblings that are in Grèce Armenvilliers. And look how close it is to Paris, just east of Paris. So Angeline Marie Brunetti changed her name to Giulia Marie Brunetti. And she is the only child who did not take on the English version of her birth name. She chose a different name. So, which name do you use in the family history? So these are the 10 points that I have learned about genealogy during COVID-19. I don't know everything about genealogy, and the amount of information online is overwhelming. Choose the sites that best suit your research. Number 2, digitize your photos front and back as placed in the photo album. Doing the back as well is good to do it because you can play with it for contrast and maybe see if there's some other handwriting behind it to figure out if there's a name on it. Number 3, sharing family history online enables you to collaborate with distant cousins. Mine was in New Zealand. Number 4, take a DNA test and connect with other cousins. One of them was in my own neighborhood, and the other one was in England. 5, check cemetery websites before traveling to cemeteries. Number 6, don't stop at transcriptions. Find the originals. Constantly check genealogy websites for newly added records. Number 7, while checking record collections, search for all persons with the same surname and multiple spellings. Number 8, while checking those record collections, check the dates that they cover and search for any other family surnames in that time period. And I would also check the land records, those land petitions for anybody who might have been dealing with Colonel Talbot. There might be a surprise there for you. Number 9, learning about the history of an area can sometimes reveal the why a family member was living at that place and in that time. And number 10, a family tree is correct until new information is found that proves something is wrong. So thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy your research time. Are there any questions?
Hello, Deborah. This is Pat. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation and being able to see all that you accomplished during our downtime of COVID. There aren't any direct questions. However, there is a question actually from Jason asking about the Hazel page that you showed earlier and whether it was in the handout. Because he said that it looks like both you and he are descendants of the Hazels. So I didn't see your email address up there. I don't know if you want to give it out so that perhaps he can connect with you.
Okay. Yep, I can give my email address. It's family.finder@hotmail.com.
So family.finder@hotmail.com.
Correct.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat box. Thank you. And there aren't any other questions that have come up.
I think the reason I was probably going in and out was because I was waving my hands around and probably covered up the microphone.
If there aren't any questions, we could just wait a few minutes in case some come up. But maybe I could just take this time to thank Deborah for her presentation. It's been very interesting and very entertaining. I think everyone will agree that having genealogy as a hobby was a lifesaver when we couldn't do anything else. But soon we'll be out and about again, and hoping that the weather cooperates and we'll be able to enjoy some of our spring activities.
Cemeteries are a wonderful place to go when you have COVID.
Okay, Deborah and Linda, there are a couple of questions have come in. One's from Katie, says, I heard that DNA tests are not that accurate. Which one do you suggest as the best? And also, is there a way that your DNA is not sold to other companies, or is it something that you check off?
For DNA, most of the companies that I've dealt with are reputable ones, and they say they don't sell it. So I do recognize them as, I don't give it to everybody, but there's Ancestry and there's Family Tree DNA. There's My Heritage and 23andMe. And the other one is Living DNA, which is out of England. And each of them had a reason. I had a reason for each of them separately as to why I did my DNA there. And, but Ancestry is the one that I use the most, and they have it written right in their contract that they don't sell it.
And she's asking which one is the best. And I think you made reference to the fact that it depends on what you want to get out of it.
The first one I did was 23andMe. And we did that because our son was was adopted from Korea. And they were the only one that gave medical information. And that's what we wanted for him. So that's why we did 23andMe. Then we did Family Tree DNA because they did the Y-DNA. And my husband was doing the Y-DNA testing with a person from Australia and a person from Ireland, and we proved that all three of them were related. And then we did 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, Living DNA, and it was basically because they were both 98% British, and they were able to give us all the different counties that our ancestors came from, because they were basically focusing just on English ancestry, okay? And then we did, then I did Ancestry DNA, and if I had done Ancestry DNA first, I would have saved myself a whole bunch of money, because some of the other ones would take the raw data of their DNA and put it in for free. So I've spent more money than I should have. And then when My Heritage came on, I put all of my DNA raw data from 4 of the different companies all into My Heritage, and I've gotten a lot of DNA matches that way, and they match different ones. It's interesting. I'm not I'm not an expert at DNA in any matter of shape or form, so I don't know how to do the figuring out with the numbers and the mathematic kind of stuff. It's just basically looking at other people's family histories to figure out who is how we are connected. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, I hope so. I think it should. Someone else asked, what was your best find during COVID? Sounds like you had a lot of different finds. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, I found quite a bit, and it's finding the family that was my grandmother's birth father. That has been the most exciting for me, that to fill that part of the family tree and to get all of this lady's information. Like, she did all the research. I just put it into my computer and basically was able to do it. And with the DNA for that section, I didn't just match him. I didn't just match Bill, but I matched another cousin on family tree DNA that Margaret had also put on. So that's how you use the DNA you see how many of the people in his family tree also have their DNA on Ancestry, and do they match? And they matched me. So that was the most exciting, just to see DNA does work.
Well, that's it. And you found that one person's name, and then that just opened up that whole line right behind them.
It did, yeah. And then we kept finding, like, I matched with Margaret's, and I matched with her daughter's DNA. And the sad thing was, Margaret passed, and during the time that I was doing the research, her daughter passed from cancer as well. And that was sad that I couldn't get her the loyalist certificate before she passed. But her two aunts have it. And Bill's got his too, so I'm
Good.
pretty proud that I was able to help them.
Yes. We've had a couple people say a great presentation and very interesting. And then we've got another question. Have you had difficulty with European languages? Trish has German heritage and is wondering how to gain entrance to documentation from there. I assume she doesn't speak German.
I had a friend who lived in Amherstburg and he was doing German research and his wife was German. And he said, you don't know what the problems are until you do German research. And I said, well, I don't have to do German research. So I'm sorry, but I have never done German research. And I know that the spelling and the language is much more difficult. So I would suggest looking for any kind of workshops that deal with the German language and try to at least figure out the basic words that you need, like the numbers and the months of the year and the days of the week, you know, the birth, marriage, death words that can help you to figure out what the document's talking about.
Yeah, I would echo that. I have, my grandmother is German, so everything behind her is German. And I have a book that's, I can't remember the author or the title, but it's on translating from German to English. It's a German English dictionary, but related to genealogy. So, you know,
Oh, perfect.
You learn your common words, like as you mentioned, for birth records and death records and censuses, what those words are so that you can then recognize them, and then, you know, numbers and that kind of thing. So I found that was very helpful. But if you can find any courses or Facebook groups, I found have been helpful related to German genealogy. They can be helpful as well. But yes, find some courses, books, dictionaries, that kind of thing can be a great help.
There's a magazine that I get online. It's called Family Tree Magazine. I think it's out of the States. And they have some of their magazine articles are based specifically on German research.
Yeah.
So that might be a place to start.
Yeah.
And it's through, you can get a free thing, I think, through Ontario Ancestors if you're a member. If you look at the members guide stuff.
Yeah, and Katie says, thank you, wonderful. So that information is going to help her out. I don't see any other questions. Linda?
I do see someone has written up, I believe, the name of the genealogical dictionary. Is that the one you had, Ernest Thode, German English Genealogical Dictionary?
Yes, I'm not seeing that anywhere on my chat, but that does sound familiar.
Yeah, and someone else did mention that through lines on Ancestry is good, but it is only as accurate as the family trees that are put on the site.
Correct.
They're not always correct. And I have had that experience where I was very excited at one point because I thought that I had somehow, there was a DNA connection that proved the parent of like a 4 times great grandfather, that it was sort of my brick wall. But when I actually did the research, there's no way that was correct. So you do have to do the research. You can't just assume that because they think it comes from that side of the family that it's true. You do have to do your own research to make sure that it's correct. But most of them are correct, I must say. It's still worthwhile trying it out for sure.
Yeah, I've done through lines with the Hicks family, which is my new family that I now have.
Oh,
and there's a lot of misinformation on the loyalist side of the family. And with that, I put it in one way and I got matches. And then I put it in a different way and I was coming up with different matches with my DNA. So we'd match all of those people with DNA, but you can tell that the family trees has the wrong information.
Right,
But you
right,
still match them with DNA. It's
exactly,
not the DNA that's wrong, it's the family tree that's wrong.
right. Well, I'm going to be watching that London Middlesex branch webinar. They're going to be talking about through lines, so that should be an interesting one to see for those that are interested in DNA. But now I'm just thinking it's 8:15, so we probably should sign off. So for now, take care, stay safe, and we'll see everyone in May. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.